After finalizing the sale of my company for a staggering $32 million, I began planning a retirement party, envisioning a future filled with calm and quiet joy. But just as I was about to raise my glass for a toast, I watched in disbelief as my daughter-in-law, Chloe, discreetly added something to my wine. The betrayal was absolute. Seizing a moment when no one was paying attention, I calmly switched my glass with her father's. The events that unfolded next left me utterly shaken. Ethan's fist slammed down on the polished surface of my cherry wood desk, causing the freshly signed contracts to flutter. $5 million, he declared. That's what I need, and I need it immediately. I looked up from the papers laid out before me, my fingers still wrapped around the pen I had just used to sign away 32 years of my life's work. The ink on the sale agreement hadn't even had a chance to dry. $32 million. It was meant to signify freedom, retirement, the beginning of a brand new chapter. Ethan, I've just sold the company. I can finally afford to retire. That's wonderful, Mom, he replied, his eyes shining with an expression I had never witnessed in him before. It was pure greed, a raw and undisguised hunger. Now you're in the perfect position to help out your son. $5 million, he repeated. I have debts I need to clear, and I want to launch my own business. Chloe stood near the doorway, her calculating gaze moving between Ethan and the contracts on my desk. When Ethan glanced in her direction, she gave him a subtle nod, a silent encouragement that I nearly overlooked. You haven't even congratulated me, I said, the words coming out with more force than I had intended. This is the most significant day of my entire life, and you barge into my office making demands for money. I am congratulating you now, Ethan said, leaning forward and planting his palms flat on the desk. $32 million is an incredible sum. So, what's $5 million to you? It's practically nothing. Nothing? I had launched Vance Innovations in this very room when Ethan was just learning to walk. I had endured 18-hour workdays, sacrificing school plays and soccer games. I built something from the ground up while raising him as a single mother after his father passed away. Ethan, you have no comprehension of what this money truly represents, I said, instinctively gathering the contracts as if to shield them. This is my security, my retirement fund. I've earned this. And I'm your son, his voice cracked, sounding more like a teenager than the 38-year-old man he was. I'm entitled to something for all those years you spent working instead of being a mother. The accusation felt like a splash of icy water. Chloe moved closer, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Perhaps we could all discuss this a bit more calmly. Ethan just feels it would be a wonderful opportunity for you to help us get started. Started? Ethan had been getting started for the last 15 years. He jumped between different jobs and various schemes, always in need of a financial bailout. And since he married Chloe 3 years ago, his financial needs had escalated dramatically. Come to the party tomorrow night, I said, standing up and placing the contract securely in my desk drawer. Bring Chloe's parents. We'll have a proper celebration. I'll lay out my retirement plans. Then, perhaps we can discuss how I might be able to help you both in a responsible manner. Responsibly? Ethan's laugh was sharp and bitter. You mean with a loan that comes with terms and interest rates? I mean as a family that is supposed to care about one another's future. Chloe whispered something into Ethan's ear, and his expression hardened. If you won't help us now, then don't count on us being at your party. Ethan straightened his jacket with abrupt, angry gestures. And don't expect to see us for Sunday dinners or holidays either. The threat lingered in the air like a thick fog. I watched my son morph into a person I barely recognized. The little boy who used to curl up on my lap during my late-night work sessions, asking about business and dreaming of one day joining the company, was gone. That will be your decision, not mine, I replied, keeping my voice firm. The party begins at 7. It's up to you. Ethan headed for the door, then suddenly spun around. His fist met the desk again, this time with even greater force. A coffee mug toppled over, its contents spilling across the quarterly reports. "You're making a huge mistake, old woman. We are your family. We have more right to that money than some bank account." Chloe placed a hand on his arm, but her eyes remained locked on mine. "Come on, darling. Let's give your mother some time to reflect on what's truly important." They left together, Ethan's shoulders tense with rage, Chloe's heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. I could hear their voices echoing from the hallway, hushed but urgent. I couldn't make out Chloe's words, but her tone was unmistakable. She was in planning mode. The front door slammed shut with enough force to make the windows rattle. Peeking through my office blinds, I saw Ethan revving his BMW's engine with unnecessary volume before peeling out of the driveway. Chloe was in the passenger seat, already holding her phone to her ear. I collapsed back into my chair, my gaze fixed on the coffee stain, spreading across financial projections I would never need again. 30 years dedicated to building something meaningful, and my own son viewed it as nothing more than a lottery ticket he was entitled to cash in. The contracts felt heavier as I pulled them out of the drawer again. $32 million. It was more money than I ever could have imagined when I was a young mother working out of this small home office, with Ethan sleeping upstairs in his rocket ship bed. Where did I go so wrong? When did my son start to view family as a tool for leverage instead of a source of love? The coffee stain had seeped through 3 layers of reports by the time I finally looked away. My hands were trembling slightly as I carefully moved the documents to a dry spot. Outside, the evening shadows were stretching across the lawn, where Ethan used to play catch with his grandfather. When had he become so entitled, so calculating? I could vividly remember an 8-year-old Ethan, proudly carrying my briefcase from the car into the house. "Mom," he'd say, "when I grow up, I want to help you run the company." His gap-toothed smile had made every single one of those 18-hour days feel worthwhile. That boy would have been ecstatic about the sale. He would have asked insightful questions about my plans for retirement and would have given me a hug before anything else. The phone rang. It was Frank Reynolds, my oldest friend and fiercest business rival for 3 decades. "Eleanor, I heard the news through the grapevine. 32 million. You magnificent woman." Frank's boisterous laughter filled the office. "I imagine you're celebrating tomorrow night at 7? Can you and Brenda make it? We wouldn't miss it for anything. This occasion calls for champagne. The really good stuff." After I hung up, I felt a bit more grounded. True friends understood the weight of this achievement. They had watched me build Vance Innovations from the ground up, weathered the difficult years with me, and celebrated every single milestone along the way. The catering company, Exquisite Affairs, answered on the second ring. "This is Maria. Maria, this is Eleanor Vance. I need everything to be absolutely perfect for tomorrow night's party. 50 guests, cocktails, and a full dinner. Money is no object. Of course, Ms. Vance. We've managed several of your corporate functions. Should we be aware of any dietary restrictions? Just ensure there is an abundance of everything. This is the single most important celebration of my life." After finalizing the details with Maria, I called my attorney's office. The sale would take a full 30 days to be completely finalized, but the contracts were solid. By Halloween, I would be officially retired, wealthier than I had ever allowed myself to dream. The house felt different, quieter without Ethan's angry presence lingering in the air. It felt more like the home I had cherished for 25 years. I went to the kitchen and opened a bottle of wine. Nothing extravagant, just something to properly commemorate the moment. My phone buzzed. It was Ethan. I let it go to voicemail. 2 more calls came in right after. Then, a text message appeared. "Mom, we need to talk. This is important." "Important? For whom?" Everything was always important to Ethan when it involved money. His credit card debt, his car payments, his get-rich-quick schemes that invariably failed. But my accomplishments, my aspirations, those never seemed to command his immediate attention. The wine tasted better than the most expensive champagne. I had earned every single sip through decades of deliberate decisions and calculated risks. Ethan expected to just walk in and claim a share of a fortune he had no hand in creating. Another text came through. Chloe's parents want to meet you before the party. Can we stop by around 6:00 tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long while. David and Susan Miller, a retired teacher and a homemaker from Ohio. I had only met them on 2 brief occasions. They seemed like pleasant enough people, though perhaps a little overwhelmed by their daughter's ambitions. Did they have any idea about Ethan's demand? Were they complicit in whatever strategy Chloe was orchestrating? My reflection stared back at me from the dark kitchen window. I looked older than my 65 years, finally successful enough to enjoy my life. Yet my only child saw me as nothing more than an ATM. The wine bottle was half empty by the time I made up my mind. Tomorrow night's party would proceed exactly as I had planned. My friends, the ones who genuinely celebrated my success, would be there with me. If Ethan decided not to come, it would tell me everything I needed to know about where his priorities truly lay. I turned off the kitchen lights and went upstairs. In my bedroom, I took out the guest list I had been curating all week. 28 confirmed attendees and counting. These were the people who had stood by Vance Innovations through thick and thin. People who understood what 30 years of unwavering dedication really meant. Ethan's name wasn't on the list. I hadn't written it down because I had always just assumed that family would, of course, be there. Perhaps it was time for me to stop making assumptions about my son. The family photograph on the mantelpiece felt unusually heavy when I picked it up. It showed Ethan at 10 years old, a wide, gap-toothed grin on his face, standing next to me at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for our very first office building. His small hand was holding mine with complete trust, his eyes shining with hero worship. I sank into my leather armchair, studying that innocent face. When did that admiration sour into a sense of entitlement? When did love become a transaction? The answer surfaced with a painful clarity. Chloe. That wasn't entirely fair, I suppose. Ethan had shown signs of restlessness long before he met her. The constant job hopping, the risky investment schemes, the slow but steady withdrawal from family traditions. But Chloe had taken those tendencies and sharpened them into a ruthless ambition. I remembered their wedding 3 years ago. Ethan had been nervous but undeniably happy. Chloe, looking radiant in white silk, had seemed like the perfect match for him, intelligent, articulate, and ambitious. During the reception, she had approached me, holding a champagne flute and wearing a calculating smile. "I hope you realize how fortunate you are to have Ethan," she had said. "He's destined to achieve incredible things. With the right support." The right support. I now understood that was code for money. Within 6 months of their marriage, Ethan's requests for financial help had doubled. A bigger apartment, a newer car, investment opportunities that always seemed to demand an immediate cash injection. Chloe's influence was like an expensive perfume, intoxicating and impossible for him to ignore. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered without looking at the caller ID. "Mom." Ethan's voice was stripped of the aggressive tone from earlier. "Look, maybe we started off on the wrong foot. Maybe I was just excited about your success. Sometimes I don't express myself well." A beat of silence. "Chloe thinks we should all sit down tomorrow before the party. Her parents are driving in just to meet you properly." Chloe thinks, not Ethan thinks. The distinction was significant. "The Millers are welcome to come tomorrow night," I said cautiously, "along with everyone else who is celebrating this milestone with me." "But Mom, We really need to talk about the financial situation privately first, as a family. Financial situation? As if my retirement planning was somehow their personal emergency. Ethan, I am not discussing money with you again until you can show some basic respect for what I have accomplished. A simple congratulations would be a good place to start. I did congratulate you. No, you demanded payment. Those are two very different things. A long silence hung between us. Finally, Ethan let out a sigh. Fine. Congratulations on selling the company, Mom. I'm proud of what you've built. The words sounded rehearsed, likely coached by Chloe. But beneath the script, I thought I detected a hint of sincerity, a trace of the boy who used to bring me crayon drawings of office buildings. Thank you, I said, softening my tone slightly. That means more than you know. The party starts at 7. Cocktails in the living room. Dinner at 8. Please dress nicely. This is very important to me. We'll be there. Another pause. Mom, I really am sorry about earlier. The talk about the money. That wasn't how I intended to handle things. After we hung up, I felt a flicker of cautious optimism. Perhaps Ethan could detach himself from Chloe's influence long enough to celebrate this moment with me. Perhaps the bonds of family could still triumph over financial greed. I walked to the kitchen and reviewed my party preparations. Maria from Exquisite Affairs had confirmed every detail. The bartender, the servers, the chef, even the floral arrangements for the tables. 47 people had now RSVP'd, more than I had anticipated. The wine cellar held treasures I had been saving for just such an occasion. A 1,982 Bordeaux from the year I incorporated Vance Innovations. Champagne imported from France, not the domestic variety. Tonight demanded the very best of everything. In my study, I placed the sale contracts inside a leather portfolio. I knew some of my guests would be interested in seeing the actual documents. In understanding the scale of my achievement, $32 million was more than just money. It was the validation of every risk I had ever taken. Every sacrifice I had ever made. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9 times. I knew I needed to get some rest to prepare for tomorrow's celebration. But first, I wanted to savor this quiet moment of accomplishment. Outside my window, the neighborhood was settling into its evening rhythm. Porch lights blinked on, and the glow of television screens shone from behind curtains. Normal families living their normal lives, likely never imagining the kind of success I had found. Yet here I was, alone with my triumph, wondering why victory felt so hollow when my only child saw it. Not as an achievement, but as an opportunity. Tomorrow would reveal the truth. Either Ethan would remember how to be my son, or I would finally have to accept that some relationships simply cannot be mended. The contracts felt warm beneath my fingertips as I closed the portfolio. $32 million. It meant freedom, independence, and the power to choose who was deserving of my generosity and who had already shown me their true colors. For the first time all day, I smiled, and it was a smile without any reservations. The alarm clock's sharp ring woke me at 8 o'clock on the dot. Saturday morning sunlight poured through my bedroom curtains, promising beautiful weather for the evening celebration. My first thought wasn't about Ethan's apology call. It was about the confirmed guests who deserved to have an unforgettable night. With coffee brewing, I spread my handwritten checklist across the kitchen table. Flowers from Millfield Gardens, a curated wine selection from Giorgio's wine cellar, and fresh oysters with imported cheeses from Antoine's Gourmet Foods. Every detail had to be absolutely perfect. The crisp morning air felt refreshing as I drove toward the city center. My first destination was Giorgio's, where Giorgio himself met me at the door. "Ms. Vance, I heard about your big sale. Congratulations." His sincere enthusiasm was a welcome warmth against the chill of yesterday's family drama. "Giorgio, I need your absolute finest bottles for my retirement party tonight, I announced, scanning his premium selection with a new perspective. Money was no longer an obstacle. It was a means to create joy. Price is truly no object. Giorgio's eyebrows shot up. My friends have supported me for 30 years. They deserve to drink champagne that costs more than some people's cars. 2 cases of Dom Perignon. 1,996. 4 bottles of Chateau Margaux. 1995. Giorgio loaded my trunk as if he were handling the crown jewels. I spent $3,000 in 20 minutes and felt lighter with every purchase. Next, Antoine's gourmet foods was an overwhelming delight for the senses. Wheels of aged Parmesan, bundles of fresh herbs, and smoked salmon were arranged like works of art. The owner, Antoine, handpicked each item for me, all while sharing stories of famous galas he had catered. Retirement? After building an empire, Antoine said, kissing his fingertips. This requires our very best. When I returned home, I walked into a scene of controlled chaos. Maria's catering team from Exquisite Affairs had already transformed my terrace into something out of a luxury magazine. White linens covered tables that glittered with crystal glasses, and soft, elegant lighting was woven through the garden trellises. A smooth jazz playlist was coming from the sound system at a perfect conversational volume. Miss Vance, we need your approval on the appetizer layout, said Sarah, Maria's assistant. She gestured toward artistic platters of food that looked almost too beautiful to eat. I sampled everything. Crab cakes with a delicate blend of spices, chocolate-dipped strawberries that were bursting with sweetness. Each bite was a delicious dividend paid on years of sacrifice, a taste of pure pleasure. Perfect, I declared. Absolutely perfect. My own hands stayed busy adding the personal touches that Maria's team couldn't provide. I strategically placed family photos where guests could see my journey from a young mother to a successful entrepreneur. The signed contracts were displayed in my study, available for anyone who was curious about the actual terms of the deal. The afternoon passed in a productive haze. Sound system check? Done. Lighting adjusted for that perfect golden hour ambiance? Done. Bathrooms stocked with high-end soaps and plush towels? Done. Every single detail was important, because tonight was about proving that success was more than just a number in a bank account. At 4 o'clock, I stood on my terrace and surveyed the incredible transformation. The elegant tables awaited lively conversations. The bar gleamed, stocked with premium spirits. Soft music floated from speakers, concealed amongst the flowers. This was what $32 million could buy. Not just financial security, but the ability to create beauty, to bring together the people who mattered most, and to celebrate a life's achievement with style and grace. Ethan had demanded $5 million for his personal debts. But this was a demonstration of how wealth should be utilized, with purpose, with gratitude, and with joy shared among those who had earned their seat at the table through unwavering loyalty and genuine affection. I checked my watch. There were 3 hours until the first guests were due to arrive. It was time for a shower, a change of clothes, and the final preparations for the evening that would mark my transition from an entrepreneur to a woman of leisure. The contracts lay in their leather portfolio, waiting to be shared with friends who would grasp their true significance not as lottery tickets to be cashed in, but as tangible proof that dreams pursued with relentless determination could, in fact, come true. The first chime of the doorbell found me in the hallway, adjusting my necklace in the mirror. I took a deep breath. This was it. The celebration I had been dreaming of for years. Through the frosted glass of the door, I could see Frank and Brenda Reynolds waiting on the porch. Eleanor! Frank's big bear hug nearly lifted me off the ground. You magnificent woman. I still can't believe you managed to pull off that sale. Brenda's warm smile held 30 years of friendship. The house looks absolutely breathtaking. You've really outdone yourself. Guiding them through my transformed home felt like unveiling a masterpiece. The terrace elicited gasps of admiration. Candlelight danced on crystal. The scent of flowers filled the evening air, and jazz music drifted from hidden speakers. Giorgio's finest champagne is waiting for a proper toast later, I announced, pointing toward the bar where bottles of Dom Perignon were chilling in silver buckets. Within minutes, my driveway was filled with more cars. Mr. Peterson from the bank, still sharp as a tack at 72. Dr. Evelyn Reed, who had kept me healthy through countless high-stress deals. My neighbors, the Garcias, who had witnessed Vance Innovations evolve from a garage startup into a major acquisition target. 32 million, Mr. Peterson whistled softly. I remember when you couldn't even get approved for a $50,000 line of credit. You've earned every last cent, Evelyn added, accepting a glass of champagne from a server. All those 18-hour days have finally paid off. Each new arrival brought a fresh wave of congratulations and a flood of shared memories. Stories of late nights when I had called friends for advice, celebrations of smaller victories along the way, and commiserations during the lean years, when success seemed like an impossible dream. The Martins from 3 houses down approached me with genuine neighborhood pride. We always knew you would make it big, Eleanor. You've been such an inspiration to everyone around here. Our kids still talk about the computer camp you sponsored at their school, Mrs. Martin added. You never forgot to give back. That comment struck a pleasant chord. I had given back through scholarships, community initiatives, and quiet assistance to families going through hard times. It was real generosity, born from genuine connection, not the entitled demands of relatives. By 6:30, 28 guests were mingling between the terrace and the garden. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the fine wine, covering retirement plans, travel dreams, and investment strategies. These were people who understood that wealth came with responsibility as well as privilege. The timing of the sale was brilliant, observed Alex Chen, my former lawyer. Market conditions could not have been more ideal. Pure luck, I replied humbly. Though we both knew that wasn't true. 30 years of careful positioning, strategic alliances, and calculated risks had created the very opportunity that luck could then favor. The catering staff moved among the crowd with seamless grace, ensuring that glasses remained full and appetizer trays were constantly replenished. Every detail was falling into place exactly as I had envisioned. This was how success was meant to be celebrated. With gratitude, with dignity, and with the people who had been part of the journey. Standing near the garden fountain, watching the animated faces of my friends glowing in the candlelight, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. True friends valued effort over entitlement. They celebrated my achievements instead of demanding a piece of them. They understood that respect is earned through character, not simply inherited through a bloodline. Brenda Reynolds approached me, her eyes knowing. You look happier than I've seen you in years, Eleanor. Retirement is already agreeing with me, I said, raising my glass toward the gathering. I'm surrounded by the people who matter most. The magic of the evening was building towards the toast I had planned. A moment to properly thank everyone who had contributed to my success. But first, I wanted to savor this perfect scene. The elegant setting, the meaningful conversations, and the genuine affection that filled the air like a delicate perfume. Then, a pair of headlights swept across my driveway. A familiar BMW pulled into the last available parking spot. My hand tightened on my champagne flute as Ethan got out of the driver's side, followed by Chloe in a chic black dress. From the back seat emerged 2 older individuals, her parents, dressed respectfully for what they undoubtedly thought was a family celebration. Excuse me, I murmured to Brenda, setting down my glass with deliberate care. As I walked toward the front door, I could hear fragments of party conversation behind me, warm laughter, the clinking of glasses, the comfortable hum of a genuine celebration. Ethan was standing on my porch with an air of practiced humility. Chloe beside him holding a small, gift-wrapped box. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice devoid of yesterday's aggressive edge. "I owe you a huge apology for my behavior." David Miller stepped forward, silver-haired and dignified in his best suit. "Eleanor, congratulations on your well-deserved retirement. Ethan told us about this wonderful party. We're so grateful you included us," Susan added, her grandmotherly warmth feeling immediately sincere. "You've always been so generous to our family," but my focus remained on Ethan. His eyes met mine directly, something he had avoided during yesterday's demand for money. "I was completely out of line," Ethan said, the words sounding rehearsed but feeling sincere. "Your success is something to be celebrated, not exploited. I've been under a lot of stress with work, but that's no excuse for how I treated you." Chloe moved closer, her smile perfectly calibrated. "Eleanor, Ethan felt terrible all night about how he spoke to you. We brought a small gift to show our appreciation for including us tonight." The wrapped box felt substantial in my hands. Its expensive weight suggested a thoughtful purchase rather than a last-minute token of guilt. "You built something incredible over 30 years?" Ethan continued. "I'm proud to be your son, and I should have said that first yesterday. Instead of what I did say." Standing there in my doorway, with the sounds of my friends celebrating my life's work behind me, I felt the sharp sting of yesterday's hurt begin to fade. Maybe Ethan could separate himself from whatever pressures had fueled his desperate demand. Maybe family relationships could withstand financial strain after all. "Thank you for coming," I said, stepping aside and gesturing for them to enter my transformed home. "The party is just getting started." David whistled in appreciation at the elegant setup. "Ethan wasn't kidding about your beautiful home. This is absolutely magnificent." Leading them towards the terrace, I felt a cautious optimism begin to replace yesterday's disappointment. Perhaps Ethan had spent the night reflecting on his actions. Perhaps Chloe had advised him that patience was a better strategy than immediate gratification. Perhaps tonight could mend the rift that had been torn open just the day before. "Eleanor, your decorations are absolutely stunning," Chloe complimented, her eyes taking in the candlelit tables and lush flower arrangements. "What a truly amazing way to celebrate your achievement." My friends welcomed the new arrivals with their typical warmth. Frank Reynolds enthusiastically shook hands with David, and they immediately launched into a conversation about their respective careers in education. Brenda engaged Susan in an animated discussion about gardening techniques. "Everyone," I announced, "I'd like you to meet my son Ethan and his wife Chloe, as well as Chloe's parents, David and Susan Miller." The introduction felt natural, as if it were healing some invisible wound from the previous day's confrontation. Ethan navigated the introductions with genuine grace, asking thoughtful questions about my friends and their business connections. There was no mention of money, no subtle hints about financial expectations, just a son who seemed proud of his mother's accomplishments. "Your mother has been an inspiration to our entire community," Mrs. Martin told Ethan warmly. "She never forgot to help other people, even while she was building her own success." "That sounds exactly like my mom," Ethan replied, glancing in my direction with what appeared to be genuine admiration. Chloe positioned herself near the bar, charming the catering staff and offering to help refill drinks. Her social skills were impressive, winning over even my most discerning friends. She asked intelligent questions about retirement planning, showed sincere interest in family anecdotes, and played the role of the perfect, supportive daughter-in-law. "We should add some chairs for the family," I mentioned to Maria's assistant, who quickly arranged for additional seating at the main table. The atmosphere of the party shifted subtly with the inclusion of my family. It felt more complete now, as if the celebration had been waiting for these final guests to arrive. David's stories from his teaching days were entertaining the group. Susan's quiet wisdom was a perfect complement to the more outgoing personalities. Standing back near the garden fountain, I watched this perfect scene play out. Friends and family were mingling together naturally. Meaningful conversations were flowing between different generations. And my achievement was being celebrated by everyone who mattered most to me. This is exactly what I had hoped for. I murmured to myself as I watched Ethan laugh heartily at one of Frank's business stories. Maybe yesterday's conflict had been a necessary storm, a clearing of the air that had to happen before true reconciliation could begin. Maybe the bonds of family were stronger than a fleeting moment of greed. Leading Ethan and his family toward the main seating area felt like putting the final piece into a perfect puzzle. David immediately struck up a rapport with Dr. Silas Reed, sharing stories about their career transitions, while Susan charmed the Garcias with questions about their rose garden. "Mom, you should tell everyone about that European river cruise you're planning," Ethan suggested, his enthusiasm seeming genuinely infectious as he helped refresh the drinks of nearby guests. The suggestion immediately piqued everyone's interest. Frank leaned forward with his trademark grin. "Eleanor, you always said you'd go see the Scottish Highlands as soon as you retired. It's the first stop after the sale is completely finalized," I confirmed, accepting a fresh glass of wine from Ethan. "Scotland, then Ireland. And maybe I'll even venture into Scandinavia. 30 years of 12-hour days has earned you every mile of that adventure," Evelyn added warmly. Chloe moved gracefully from one group of guests to another, her social skills impressing even my most discerning friends. She asked insightful questions about my business relationships, showed genuine interest in discussions about retirement planning, and played the part of the perfect, supportive daughter-in-law. "Eleanor has told us so much about your friendship over the years," Chloe said, settling in beside the doctor. "Ethan and I feel so grateful to be part of this celebration tonight." "Family celebrations are the best kind," Evelyn replied. "This is exactly how success should be honored with the people who matter most." Across the terrace, Ethan caught my eye and gave a slight raise of his glass. It was a son's salute to his mother's achievement. That simple gesture seemed to erase the lingering shadows from our confrontation the day before. Whatever stress had driven his desperate demand for money appeared to have been resolved by tonight's genuine reconciliation. "I can't believe I almost missed celebrating this incredible accomplishment," Ethan told Frank during a conversation about business strategy. "My mother built this company from absolutely nothing. Just pure determination and vision." The pride in his voice sounded authentic, not the calculated flattery of yesterday, but real admiration for what I had accomplished. Maybe Chloe had helped him see the bigger picture, to prioritize family over financial pressures. David raised his wine glass in my direction. "Eleanor, 35 years of teaching taught me what dedication looks like, but building a company from the ground up, that's a remarkable display of resilience." The hardest part, I reflected, was continuing to believe it would work when everyone else said the technology consulting field was too crowded. Persistence pays off, but it can take decades to see the results. Susan nodded thoughtfully. "Chloe always said you were an inspiration, working so hard while raising Ethan on your own after your husband passed." The comment touched something deep inside me. These people understood sacrifice in a way that Ethan had seemed to forget yesterday. Tonight felt like a validation of all the choices I had made, with family and friends recognizing effort over entitlement. "This terrace setup is absolutely stunning," Chloe complimented, her eyes scanning the elegant arrangement. "You have such sophisticated taste. Everything looks like it's straight out of a magazine." "Maria's catering team deserves all the credit," I admitted. Although I did insist on a few personal touches, the family photos, the wine selection, the flowers from my mother's favorite shop. "Details are what matter on occasions like this," Chloe agreed. "Memories should be beautiful." As twilight deepened, the garden lights began to twinkle like captured stars. The party settled into a perfect rhythm, where conversations flowed effortlessly, laughter punctuated stories, and everyone seemed genuinely happy to be there. This was exactly what I had pictured when I first started planning this celebration. Ethan moved between groups with ease, sharing stories about my generosity over the years, and expressing gratitude for the lessons he learned as a child. The son I remembered from happier times had returned, replacing the angry stranger from yesterday. My mom sponsored computer camps for underprivileged kids every summer, Ethan told the Martins. I used to help out when I was old enough. She never wanted any publicity for it. She just believed that technology education could change lives. Moments like that reminded me why mending family ties was more important than any amount of money. Ethan could have been a part of this success story all along, if only he had chosen patience over immediate gratification. My phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. The caller ID showed my attorney's office number. It was likely just about the final details for Monday's closing procedures. "Excuse me, everyone," I announced, taking one last look at the perfect party scene. "I need to take this call about some closing details, please. Continue enjoying yourselves." Walking through the French doors into my living room, I pressed the phone to my ear and positioned myself by the large window that overlooked the terrace. The caller was Robert Shaw, my closing attorney, with some last-minute questions about the documentation. "Eleanor, sorry to interrupt your celebration, but the buyer's bank needs confirmation on the wire transfer timing." "Of course, Robert. Monday morning is perfect for the final transfer." Through the window, I could see my guests continuing their lively conversations, the party flowing beautifully in my absence. "The documentation has been filed with the state, and the transition team is set to start on Tuesday. It's been a very smooth process overall." Ethan was engaged in what looked like a serious business discussion with Frank and Mr. Peterson, his hands gesturing with enthusiasm. Even from this distance, I could see the looks of respect on their faces as he spoke about the company's future. "I appreciate you handling these final details personally, Robert. This sale means everything to my retirement plans." Chloe was moving casually toward the drink station, appearing to help with the hosting duties I had temporarily set aside. How thoughtful. She was proving to be the ideal daughter-in-law I had always hoped Ethan would find. "The buyer is very impressed with your operational documentation. They're confident about the transition." Something in my peripheral vision caught my attention. Chloe had paused beside the drink table, her back turned to most of the guests. Her hand moved to her pocket, and she retrieved something small. "That's excellent news, Robert," I said, but my words trailed off as I watched Chloe's movements more intently. She palmed a tiny object, a small packet or envelope, while quickly scanning the area to make sure no one was watching her. Then, with a practiced smoothness, she moved her hand over my wine glass. My breath caught in my throat. A fine, white powder fell from the packet directly into my drink. It was quick, deliberate, and unmistakable. "Eleanor, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Chloe was now stirring my wine with a cocktail stirrer, dissolving whatever substance she had just added. "Should we schedule a final call before the wire transfer on Monday?" Chloe pocketed the empty packet and the stirrer, then moved away from the table with the same casual grace she had used to approach it. No one else had noticed a thing. The guests remained engrossed in their conversations, completely oblivious to the fact that someone had just poisoned my drink. "Robert, I'm sorry, but something urgent has just come up here," I said, my hand trembling slightly as I held the phone. "Can we finalize everything first thing Monday morning?" "Of course. Enjoy your celebration, Eleanor. You've earned it." Through the window, I watched Chloe rejoin the main conversation group, her smile bright and completely natural. She positioned herself where she could keep an eye on the drink table, while seeming to be engaged with the other guests. My mind raced, piecing it all together. The reconciliation, the apologies, the perfect daughter-in-law act, it was all a calculated performance. A manipulation leading up to this very moment. They weren't here to celebrate my success. They were here to make sure I didn't live long enough to enjoy it. Ethan seemed genuinely unaware, still deep in an animated conversation with Frank. His change of heart appeared authentic, which could only mean that Chloe was acting on her own, without his knowledge. She had used his legitimate guilt over yesterday's confrontation as a cover for her own lethal plan. The wine glass sat innocently on the table, looking no different from any other drink at the party. But I knew what it now contained. One sip would be all it took. Whatever poison she had used was likely fast-acting, designed to mimic the symptoms of a heart attack or a stroke. A wealthy 65-year-old woman, celebrating with alcohol, who would ever question a sudden medical emergency? But she had made one critical error. She didn't realize that I was watching. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I straightened my shoulders and prepared to return to the party. The rules of the game had changed entirely, but now I held the advantage. Chloe believed she was carrying out the perfect murder. In reality, she had just revealed herself as the enemy I now had to defeat. It was time to turn the tables on my would-be killer. Stepping back onto the terrace, I kept the same warm smile I had been wearing all evening, even as my heart pounded against my ribs. Chloe glanced up as I rejoined the group, her eyes immediately darting toward the drink table where my poisoned wine sat waiting. "Everything settled with the closing details?" she asked with perfect innocence. "Just some final paperwork formalities," I replied, moving naturally toward my usual spot. "Nothing that can't wait until Monday morning." The poison was invisible, odorless, and probably tasteless, a professional-grade substance, meant to simulate natural causes. But Chloe had severely underestimated her target. I had survived 30 years in the competitive world of business by always staying 3 steps ahead of those who tried to bring me down. "Eleanor, shouldn't we have a proper toast to your retirement?" Chloe's suggestion was laced with a subtle urgency. "Everyone has been waiting to officially celebrate your success." Frank nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. This moment deserves champagne and speeches. This seems like the perfect moment. With all of our family and friends together," Chloe continued, building the momentum. "Your wine glass is right there, ready for the toast." She was pushing for the execution of her plan with a calculated pressure, cleverly disguised as party enthusiasm. Every word she spoke was designed to get that glass to my lips as quickly as possible. "An excellent idea," I agreed readily. "But first, Ethan and Chloe, could you two help me with something in the kitchen? I want to get that special bottle of Dom Perignon we discussed, the 1996 vintage, and the good crystal champagne flutes for a proper ceremony." Ethan straightened up, clearly pleased to be included in the preparations. "Of course, Mom. You know where everything is stored better than we do. This will make the toast even more special," I added, making the request sound both important and like a natural part of hosting a family affair. As they headed inside together, I turned to David with practiced casualness. "David, how are you finding retirement after teaching? 35 years in education is a remarkable dedication." David's eyes lit up with the passion that educators always have when discussing their careers. "Well, the transition has been fascinating. After 3 decades of being ruled by the September school schedule, I'm still getting used to having flexible time." While he spoke, gesturing expressively about the challenges of retirement, I moved closer to the drink table. David's wine glass was sitting about 18 inches from mine. It was a similar shape, held the same red wine, and was close enough for a swift exchange. "Have you and Susan thought about traveling?" I continued, keeping him engaged while I scanned the positions of the other guests. Frank was deep in conversation with Mr. Peterson about market trends. Evelyn and Susan were discussing garden planning. The other guests were all absorbed in their own conversations. No one was paying attention to the drink table. "Oh, yes. We've been planning a trip to visit the national parks," David continued enthusiastically. "Yellowstone first, then maybe the Grand Canyon." In one single, smooth motion, I switched the glasses. David's untainted wine was now in my usual spot, and my poisoned glass was shifted to his. The exchange took no more than 3 seconds, and would have looked like a natural rearrangement of items on the table during a conversation. "That sounds wonderful," I replied, stepping slightly away from the table. "The Western parks are spectacular this time of year." As David went on with his story about retirement planning, my pulse gradually returned to normal as the immediate threat passed. Chloe's poison now sat in David's glass instead of mine. The sweet irony of using her own father as an unwitting shield felt perfectly just. Ethan and Chloe emerged from the kitchen carrying the Dom Perignon and the crystal flutes, their faces bright with anticipation for the celebration to come. "Everything's ready for the proper toast?" Ethan announced, placing the champagne bottle on the table with a touch of ceremony. Chloe's gaze immediately flicked to the drink table, confirming that my wineglass was still in its position. A satisfied smile spread across her face, revealing her complete confidence in the success of her plan. "Perfect timing," I declared, moving toward my switched glass while keeping an eye on Chloe's expectant face. "Let's make this a toast to remember." She positioned herself to get a clear view of me drinking, eager to witness the poison take effect. Her father sat beside his deadly glass, completely unaware that his daughter had just attempted to murder his host, and was now using him as an unwitting accomplice. "Everyone, please gather around," I called out, raising the very glass that was meant to kill me. The irony was exquisite. Chloe thought she was watching her victim approach his final moments, when in reality, she had just set up her own father to suffer the fate she had intended for me. It was time for the evening's real entertainment to begin. Everyone gathered expectantly around the elegantly set table, their glasses raised in anticipation of my retirement speech. The moment felt absolutely perfect. Candlelight danced on crystal. Friends and family were united in celebration, and the soft evening air carried the promise of new beginnings. "Friends, this is truly the most meaningful evening of my life," I began, standing confidently and commanding everyone's attention while I internally braced for the drama that was about to unfold. 30 years of building something from nothing, and here I am, surrounded by the people who matter most. Chloe had positioned herself to have a clear view of my wineglass, her eyes bright with a sick anticipation. She had no idea that her carefully orchestrated murder was about to become her very public downfall. "Your friendship and support have made this success possible," I continued, my eyes scanning the faces of those who had stood by me through decades of struggle. "Tonight, I want to talk about loyalty, about trust, and about what family truly means." The shift in my tone caught some people's attention. Frank raised an eyebrow, sensing something different from my usual pattern of speech. "I've learned that not everyone who claims to love you actually does." My gaze moved deliberately to Chloe, whose confident smile began to waver. "Some people see success and think only of what they can take from it." Ethan leaned forward, a look of confusion on his face at the growing tension in what should have been a celebratory moment. The other guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of where this speech was heading. Unfortunately, not everyone here tonight shares that genuine affection. I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the silent air. In fact, someone at this very table tried to poison me just minutes ago. Shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. Chloe's face turned ashen, her eyes darting between me and the drink table, as she tried to process how her plan could have possibly gone wrong. "David, stop!" I shouted, just as he raised his wine glass to his lips. "Don't drink that wine. It's been poisoned." David froze in mid-motion, the glass trembling just inches from his mouth. Around the table, guests recoiled in horror, several of them setting down their own drinks in alarm. "What are you talking about?" Ethan stood up, his voice cracking with confusion. "Mom, what's going on?" "Chloe, would you like to explain what you put in my wine glass?" I turned to face her directly, my voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. "I saw you add something from a small packet while I was inside taking that phone call." "That's absolutely ridiculous." Chloe's voice pitched higher with panic. Why would I ever poison anyone? This is insane. But her face betrayed her completely. The color had drained from her cheeks. Her hands were trembling as she gripped the back of her chair, and her eyes were already calculating escape routes, even as she protested her innocence. You looked around to make sure no one was watching, I continued relentlessly. You stirred it in, and then you pocketed the evidence immediately afterward. Ethan stared at his wife with a look of growing horror. Chloe, tell her she's wrong. Tell everyone this is some kind of mistake. Of course it's a mistake, she snapped, but her voice was now laced with desperation. Eleanor, you must have seen something else. I was just helping with the drinks. David was still holding the poisoned glass, staring at it with a dawning comprehension of how close he had just come to death. Susan clutched his arm, tears streaming down her face. Fine, I said calmly. Let's settle this, scientifically. We'll take that wine to a laboratory for analysis. If I'm wrong, I will publicly apologize to everyone here. But if I'm right, I reached toward David's glass. This will prove attempted murder. Let me just secure this evidence. Chloe lunged forward with a sudden desperation, her calculated facade shattering completely. You can't! She cried. She stumbled against the table leg with a theatrical clumsiness, her hand striking the wine glass. Crystal shattered against the stone terrace. Red wine splashed everywhere. The evidence was destroyed in what looked like a single, accidental moment. Oh no, Chloe gasped, her performance utterly unconvincing. I'm so clumsy. I am so sorry. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Ethan was staring at his wife with undisguised suspicion. How convenient, I said quietly. And everyone in attendance understood exactly what they had just witnessed. The shattered glass caught the candlelight like scattered diamonds on the stone terrace. Chloe knelt beside the mess, making a show of trying to clean up while avoiding the accusatory stares of everyone around her. That was no accident, Chloe, I said, standing over her, my voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. You destroyed the evidence because you knew exactly what that laboratory analysis would have revealed. I don't have to listen to these wild accusations. She shot to her feet, her composure finally breaking completely. Mascara streaked down her cheeks as panic replaced her calculated poise. This is ridiculous. Ethan stepped between us, but his voice lacked conviction. Mom, maybe there's some kind of explanation. The explanation is simple, I said, keeping my eyes fixed on Chloe's guilty face. Your wife came here tonight to murder me for my money. She used your genuine reconciliation as a cover for her attempted homicide. That's a lie! Chloe's voice rose to a near hysterical shriek. Ethan, are you going to let her talk about me this way? But Ethan was staring at his wife with dawning recognition. The money. The demand yesterday. You pushed me to ask for the $5 million. You said we deserved it immediately. You needed help with your debts. Chloe snapped, then immediately caught herself, realizing she had revealed too much. What debts? David asked quietly, his voice heavy with disappointment. Chloe, what have you done? Frank stepped forward, his lawyer's instincts taking over. Eleanor, what exactly did you witness? I saw her add powder from a small packet into my wine glass while I was on the phone inside. I recounted. She stirred it in, looked around to ensure no one had noticed, and then pocketed the evidence. I gestured toward the broken glass on the ground. When I suggested we have it tested at a lab, she immediately destroyed the proof. Evelyn nodded grimly. The timing of that accident was remarkably convenient. Chloe's eyes darted between the faces surrounding her. Guests who, just moments before, had welcomed her so warmly, were now looking at her with disgust and suspicion. Even Ethan was taking a step back, creating a physical distance as the emotional one grew wider. "We don't have to stay here and be insulted," she said, grabbing her purse from a nearby chair, her movements sharp with desperation. "Ethan, we're leaving now." "Chloe, wait." Ethan looked torn between his wife and his mother, but the evidence was overwhelming. "Maybe we should explain." "There's nothing to explain, because I didn't do anything wrong." Her voice now carried the shrill edge of trapped guilt. "Come on. We're going home." She stalked toward the house, her high heels clicking angrily against the stone. Dennis followed her reluctantly, glancing back at me with an expression of confused shame. "Mom, I don't know what to say." "The truth would be a good start," I replied, my tone firm but not unkind. "When you're ready to hear it." David and Susan remained frozen by the drink table, their faces etched with a mixture of heartbreak and humiliation. Around us, the party guests murmured among themselves, processing the dramatic revelation that had shattered what should have been a perfect celebration. Car doors slammed in the driveway with a note of finality. An engine roared to life, revved unnecessarily loud in a clear expression of frustrated rage. Tires squealed against the asphalt as Ethan's BMW sped off into the night, carrying away the criminals who had tried to destroy my retirement before it had even begun. But David and Susan stayed behind, their shoulders bowed with shame, facing the wreckage of what they had believed was their daughter's happy marriage to a successful man. The broken glass crunched under my feet as I moved to comfort them, because unlike their daughter, these were good people who had been caught in circumstances far beyond their control. "I'm so sorry," David whispered, his voice breaking. "We had no idea she was capable of something like this." Justice had been served, but now came the much harder task of healing the wounds that betrayal always leaves behind. A heavy silence stretched across the terrace, broken only by the fading sound of the car disappearing into the night. Broken glass glittered amongst the scattered drops of poisoned wine, a stark reminder of the betrayal that had almost destroyed everything. David stood motionless, still trying to process how close he had come to being killed at his own daughter's hands. Susan dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her quiet sobs filled with decades of parental heartbreak. "We are so deeply sorry, Eleanor," David said, his voice trembling with a mixture of shame and gratitude. "You saved my life tonight. We must have failed as parents somehow. This is our responsibility." "David, Susan, look at me." I moved closer and placed a gentle hand on the older man's shoulder. "This is not your fault. You are good, decent people. Chloe made her own choices. You didn't raise her to be a criminal." "But we must have missed something," Susan whispered. "Some sign that she could do such a terrible thing." "Evil sometimes wears a perfect mask," Evelyn said softly, joining our small circle. "None of us suspected her true nature until tonight." Frank approached with a small brush and dustpan, already starting to help clean up the shattered evidence. "Eleanor, your quick thinking saved David's life. How did you figure out what was happening?" "Pure chance," I admitted. "I was standing by the window taking a business call when I saw her add something to my wine. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing." "You handled that situation with incredible grace, Mr. Peterson added, his banker's mind appreciating the strategic thinking under pressure. "Most people would have panicked or confronted her immediately." Other guests gradually joined our conversation, their initial shock giving way to admiration for how I had protected an innocent man while exposing a would-be murderer. The catering staff quietly replaced the broken items and brought out fresh glasses, helping to restore a sense of order to the chaos. "I keep thinking about how she was encouraging the toast," Brenda Reynolds observed with a shudder. "She was eager to watch you drink the poison." "But she underestimated Eleanor's intelligence," Dr. Reed replied. "And now, David and Susan are safe. That's what matters most." David raised his new, untainted glass toward me, his hand steadier now. "To a woman who proved that good can triumph over evil, even within families. To Eleanor, the group echoed, their voices filled with genuine warmth and respect. But I raised my own glass toward David and Susan instead. To people who show grace under impossible circumstances, David and Susan, you are always welcome in my life. My tears shifted from sadness to gratitude. We don't deserve your kindness, after what our daughter tried to do. Your daughter's choices are a reflection of her character, not yours, I replied firmly. You stayed when she ran away. You faced the truth when she chose to live a lie. That tells me everything I need to know about your hearts. As the evening went on, the conversations gradually returned to a celebratory tone. The attempted murder became a story of justice served, friendship proven, and wisdom rewarded. David shared memories of my generosity over the years, painting a picture of consistent character that made Chloe's betrayal seem even more shocking by contrast. She sponsored those computer camps every summer, David told the other guests. She never wanted any credit for it, just believed that technology education could change lives. That's the Eleanor we know, Frank confirmed. Success never changed her core values. By 10 o'clock, the last of the guests were departing with promises to stay in touch during my retirement. David and Susan insisted on helping with the final cleanup, their way of contributing something positive after their daughter's destructive actions. Standing on my terrace as they finished clearing the tables, I surveyed the scene of my triumph. Justice had been served without any legal complications. An innocent man had been protected. A toxic relationship had been severed cleanly. And most importantly, my retirement was now beginning with absolute clarity about which relationships deserved my time and which people had earned their place in my chosen family. The contracts for my $32 million sale sat safely in my study, waiting to fund new adventures with people who valued me for reasons that had nothing to do with money. Tomorrow would bring a world of new possibilities, free from manipulation and false loyalty. Tonight had proven that wisdom, patience, and quick thinking could defeat even the most calculated evil. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply to let criminals expose themselves to everyone who matters.